All right, welcome to our first podcast. I am your host. I'm actually one of your hosts. It's a good thing we're not recording this video. Dennis is wearing an eye patch. And we are two of the founders of the Wednesday Night Group. You might have heard of that, which is one of the most authentic. I won't say the word best. I'll say the word one of the most authentic Jeet Kune Do groups in the world. And that's just because it sounds cool. Sifu Dennis Blue. Is here as my co-host and star, and we are going to discuss just a little bit about the backgrounds of what we're doing tonight, and hopefully kick this thing off and make it exciting. Dennis, you have been in Jeet Kune Do at least 3 years, but I think it was longer than that. How did you get involved in JKD? I mean, I know you were in martial arts before that, but what was your background?
Oh wow, that's a long story. It's a long time ago when me and my younger sister Methuselah and I. No, anyway, at the time I was studying with Pugil and taking the Jido-Kwan Taekwondo, and I had a friend Pete who had read uh, Dan Inosanto's book. What the heck was it called? Jeet Kune Do, The Art and Philosophy of, yeah. And he saw that Tackett's name was in the back of that book. So the funny thing is, he goes, let's get a phone book. He looked in the phone book, looked up Tim Tackett, and he goes, oh, there he is. So he says, let's give him a call. So Pete called Tim, and Pete was like, yeah, my name is Pete, blah, 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 and I want to study Jeet Kune Do. And Tackett's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, and hung up. So I go, let me try. So I called back and I go, hello, Mr. Tackett, my name is Dennis Blue. I'm currently studying Taekwondo with Master Pugil, and I am interested to see if you're taking on students. And he goes, oh yeah, come by Wednesday, 7:30. Here's the address. Okay, talk to you later. Bye. Click. And then that's how it started. So yeah.
How long ago was that?
Huh?
At least 3 years, right?
It was in the it was in the mid 70s.
There you go. So if you had gotten a quicker start, you could have been one of the original students.
Yep,
You waited around.
I did. I procrastinated like on most things. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't show up to Bruce Lee's door and
Well, the funny thing is back in 70, 72, 73, right before Bruce died, Bruce was supposed to he was supposed to show up for one of those expo martial arts things, like the next week, but he passed away before he could go to that thing. But I was at that time, I was studying Shotokan in Los Angeles when I saw that poster. So that's just, I could have met him way before I even started studying, but yeah, he passed away too soon. He didn't even wait for me. That's not right.
yes. I mean, yeah, he passed away too soon for a number of reasons, but
Yeah.
definitely he it's unfortunate that you didn't get to meet him. And it's funny, yeah. So with I'll just jump in quickly and tell you the similarities in my story. Of course, I came around much later, but I also had a background in Taekwondo, and mine was under the Junri system
Hmm.
in the East Coast, and it was a similar thing. It was so funny that I was so excited to finally find somebody teaching Jeet Kune Do, and of course, I bought when I was in Virginia, which is where I lived. Uh, I had gone to Inside Kung Fu, saw that there was this book called Jun Fan Jeet Kune Do, the textbook, and I sent away. I used to send cash through the mail. I don't know if I did then, but every once in a while I'd actually get the book that I paid for. But I sent it, I sent away for it. And then I waited a couple of weeks. It didn't show up. And then I had been invited for Christmas with my mom out here in Southern California, very close to Redlands, in fact, next door in Mentone. So I was out here in 1990, and sh what happened was, right, shortly before I'm about to go back, my dad, it's several weeks, but it was like, right before I'm about to go back, basically, my dad says, "Hey, your book came. Do you want me to send it to you, or do you just want to wait till you get back?" Well, the normal thing to do is like, "Oh, I can wait. Don't go to the trouble sending it to me from
Right.
from Virginia to California because I'll just be back there soon." But I'm like, "No, no, send it, send it." So he sends it, and there's the Junfan Jikendo textbook, and I spent a couple of weeks practicing everything I could in the pictures and reading it over and over again, and I'm seeing. Uh, various pictures of various people on the cover. And Tackett's doing trigger points on somebody and so on, on the cover, remember that? And so finally, as it's getting closer and closer from my return flight, I just happened to notice that the author's name and address and phone number are in the cover. In fact, both of them, Chris Kent's was as well. And I think this was back when Redland still had a 714 area code. But so yeah, I actually called him up. Same thing, kind of like, oh, Mr. Tackett, seafood. Yeah, yeah. Actually, I don't think I knew the term seafood at the time. I was like, I study under the Junri system, and it was a kind of like a blur. I was rambling, and he says, "Yeah, Wednesday night," and I think he was like saying $30 a month or something like that.
Yeah, it's been the same price forever.
Yeah, I know. And I was so I was like, okay, okay, I'll be there, I'll be there. And I literally hung up and I said, "Well, Mom, I'd like to stay because I found JKD." She said, "Sure, talk to your dad." So I called my dad, and yeah, and I'm like, "I'm moving to California because I found JKD." So that's commitment. And so it sounds like a long time if I tell you I've been doing JKD for 35 years. But then think about how long you've been doing it.
No, let's not.
And this isn't a braggadocious thing or anything. But I was thinking, when Tim Tackett was teaching, when Sifu Tackett was teaching there in 1990, if you think about it, he had only really been doing JKD for maybe 16, 17, 18 years. It doesn't seem like it, right? Because it seems like so far back to the 70s. And now I've been doing it for 35. So it's just such a weird thing to think that these wise old men, they must have been in it for 100 years or something, but only only a little time had gone by. And of course, you did it for a bit longer. So, anyways, yeah, that brings us to the next question, and that was you did study with Tim Tackett, and before we get to the other instructors that came to the garage, you also spent time at the Inosanto Academy.
Hmm.
How did that happen? And what was the time frame?
Purely by accident, I was looking for a pizza parlor. No, um,
He was delivering.
actually, uh, that was, I don't want to say Tackett's fault. That was Tackett's doing. Um, he goes, you need to go down and see Dan and pick up some material and bring it back to us to keep us up to date, kind of thing. So I started going down there. I think it was probably driving down there once a week, something like that. I did that for a little while, for a long time actually. Yeah. So it was pretty cool back then because after class got to hang out with Dan, went to dinner and stuff. It was pretty cool back in those days. Yeah.
Yeah. That was something I missed out on, at the at the time I was very honored to meet, Bob Bremer as he started coming around, but there was the beginnings of the nucleus and
Mhm.
all that. And so I got to start meeting different Bruce Lee students as you did and may have already done before. I only ever met, I wouldn't even call it met. I didn't, I guess I'll say it for the sake of the story, but the only time I ever met Dan Inosanto. In fact, to this day, I haven't done any seminars with them or anything.
Hmm.
We were down there working with Eric Paulson. I remember doing some grappling. And
Was that for one of the seminars that he was doing?
I don't know. I actually didn't. I don't remember a seminar. I
Because there
think,
was a time where, I was going down there to study the shoot wrestling and then doing the Gracie stuff at the time.
yeah, I think he just brought me along, and Louis Berard came along, and I
Mm.
remember Esteban was quite involved. He wasn't there that day though,
Mm.
and Inosanto came in, and I think I might have been touching the heavy bag or something, the Bruce Lee's heavy bag.
Oh, the one that says, please don't touch.
Yeah, or maybe it looked like I was about to touch it because I usually touch. If it says don't touch, you have to touch. But I didn't. But I remember him saying something to Eric like, "Hey, make sure these guys don't do this or that." And I was just like, "Well, that was a great impression." But so I have students that have done his seminars and everything, and it's just I've never gotten to. I guess I don't see the advertisements and things like that. And
Well,
then
yeah,
like,
well, truthfully, I think I've only been to one of his seminars. Um, that's just because who was it? Told me that Dan was going to be down at the IMB Academy one day, and I just happened to be in that area. So myself and no, yeah, it was Tackett. Yeah, myself and Tackett walked in. Now the strangest thing is, as soon as I walked through the door, Dan stops and he goes, "Dennis, do you have that book in the car by Don Drager, The Archipelago Martial Art, blah, blah, blah?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Can you get that? And then when you get it, bring it back here." So, number one, I don't know how he knew I had that book. And then
wow,
when I came in, he was like, "Okay, turn it to page so and so and read to me paragraph so and so." I was just like, okay, it was a weird experience, but yeah, that's the only seminar I ever watched him teach. Because usually, I took classes down at the academy. I either took or observed classes down at the Glencoe Academy when he was on Glencoe and Marina Del Rey.
wow.
And when Burt Richardson was still there, that's when the Dog Brothers were just getting going. Yeah, there's quite a few guys who are still there at that time that are just branched out into different things. So yeah.
Yeah. Is that what's really amazing with all that is that because MMA wasn't out,
Hmm.
and people tended to get many of the things that Dan taught confused with JKD. And to this day, in fact, some of the people listening to us are going to say, no, it is JKD because Bruce Lee wanted you to take everything you could find and squish it together. They may not use those words, but I still think there was a value to Inosanto, to Dan, researching and bringing, because the unfortunate thing is that people would keep confusing it with JKD. But when I started there in 1990, the first thing we did was start with Thai kicks, and then we did Pak Sao, and then we were doing straight lead. But at the perfect time, we had the influence of Bob Bremer coming in and telling us how to sift through and to JKDize everything, wearing your JKD glasses. But
Yeah, his famous no, no, Bruce would never do that.
you'll never do that. Yep. So before we get into that, when did you get off? When did you go to the military? Was that somewhere? Had you already done that, or was that during the middle of
Yeah,
your?
yes and no.
Okay, so you're already training with Tackett, and then you went off and decided to save the world.
Yeah, yeah, that's what. Once I went, started with Tackett, went into service, got out, went back, blah blah, and yeah,
Gained an affinity for firearms and a love. Yeah.
firearms. What are those?
Well, come on, you've got to fill out you have to fulfill the American stereotype. You're strapping now, right? But
Hmm.
we won't say, but it is funny because I actually had somebody in a European country I asked me, isn't it a law that you have to own a gun in America? And I was like, no, it's a right.
Yeah.
I've heard of cities maybe or towns where they're like, we suggest you own a gun, but
Well, Switzerland's like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're like, you need to own a gun.
by law, you have to have a gun in your house. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, if everyone did, the problem is it's hard. Anyway, that's a whole other subject we can get
Yeah.
on.
Anyway.
So, but okay, so you went off, became special forces. You
What?
you became every branch of every special forces there was.
Oh yeah. Well, all the
Taught
way back to
Captain,
Vietnam. Yeah, that was me.
you taught Captain Crunch.
Oh, the rumors.
But
Uh,
yes, but what was such an amazing. Well, okay, so getting back to the JKD path there, and what happened at the Wednesday night group, which was a perfect. I think that the '90s were a very special time because of how everything came together. Of course, before that, you got to spend a lot more time with some people that unfortunately passed away early on. But
Mm.
um, be, when I came in and like they said, well, I was from Taekwondo and I was one of those kids that actually practiced. Actually put ankle weights on and went down in my basement in Maryland and went later on in Virginia outside and would kick hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times and try to be as fast as I could. And so I wanted to be the best in the world. And
Hmm.
like Bruce Lee, like a lot of his fans that watch
Right.
movies, they're like, well, I want to be like that. So you got to, and I read books, I read articles and everything about talk about how much he trained. And that's unfortunately something you don't see a lot of anymore. Young people that actually realize that hard work is how you get things done. But there's a few. But when I got there and we started doing, I think we might have started with straight lead, but then we got to Thai kicks, and I'm like, Taekwondo? No, Thai boxing. You've heard of Thai boxing. I'm like, well, I've heard of it. I'd never seen it. And so, of course, you know what Tackett does. Yeah, Jeremy. What's your name? Jeremy. Okay. Yeah. Dennis, why don't you show him the Thai kick? I'm holding the Thai pads and he kicks, yeah, you kick the pads, and I feel this shock of cold go all the way down through my body to the floor. And I'm trying to be like, I'm a badass martial artist, man. I'm not going to show you that that bothered me. But what the thing that's going through my head is, I don't want him to do that again. And I think you did like 30 in a row. And I was like, I don't remember. I wasn't counting maybe, but it was funny. But I thought at first I was like, damn, I hate this because my kicks should be like really like his. They should already be this good because how much I practice. And I didn't realize that there was a difference just between, it's not just about doing a kick over and over again, but it was how you do it. You
Yeah,
know, and
mechanics. Yeah.
yeah, and so that I went home and I thought, okay, if he's that much better than me, and I practice hours every day, then I have reached the right place because not only is, obviously he's good, but there's something different about, and I was already excited about JKD. This was a Thai boxing kick. And, as I got excited and came back at every Wednesday night, I was there. To this day, I'm allergic to cigarette smoke, but in those days, really badly. And Tackett smoked right in the opening of the garage. He was smoking cigarettes in those days. And I would go home and get tonsillitis like regularly, but I would try not to skip. In fact, I missed my girlfriend's graduation, her high school graduation, because it was on a Wednesday night. But I was like,
Mm.
I told you I don't miss training. Nowadays, I tell my students, if you're sick, don't come to class. I appreciate your dedication and all that, but
Mm.
please. But anyway, that was like really powerful. So we were doing Penjak Silat. We were doing I think we were maybe just starting with the Gracies. I know we were doing Mark McFan's stuff
Oh,
that,
wow, yeah, huh,
yeah.
yeah.
I still teach some of those things off of his tape. And yeah, it got really uncomfortable that night.
Mm, mm.
Attack was trying to explain how to get out of this headlock and was
Don't get
describing,
into it. Anyway.
yeah, he was describing a sexual act with another man, and that's what I should be emulating.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
was, and I was just like, this is not like my Taekwondo classes.
We're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah. But okay, so I have to back up. So the first time I met Bob Bremer, I think it was pretty close to when he first started showing up because he really didn't start talking much until after he had been there for a few weeks, at least from my point of
Yeah,
view.
yeah.
But I walked in the very first night and I saw this old guy looking at the pictures. And if anyone's watched the memorial service, I told this story at Bob's memorial. But he's looking at all the pictures on the wall, and I go up and he's very nice, and he starts saying, how you doing? And he starts talking to me about Bruce Lee. Now I'm the biggest Bruce Lee fan in the world, and so of course I've got to, jump in and tell them my stories and all this and what I know about Bruce, not knowing. And the first thing that went through my head, by the way, was, boy, Tackett takes the students pretty old here. And so I'm like, well, so he starts telling me something about Bruce Lee, and I corrected him. I said, well, actually, it was like this, and like this, and this, and it was, and he just looks at me. He doesn't say, you know, I was there or I knew Bruce Lee. You know, he just goes, is that right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say. So it was that class, and nobody else saw me telling him the stories. We were the first two people there. And just later on, Mark, I can't remember his name. He used to come with his girlfriend and train.
Oh, Mark Team.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was there, and he goes, "You see that guy over there? He was like Bruce Lee's best student." And I was like, "Oh, come on! Why did I have to correct him and tell him?" But okay, so how do you remember Bob getting introduced to the group? I mean, I mean the first time he just showed up? He just, it was sort of like that, one of those things, like he was just there one day.
You know what the funniest thing is you know who was there before Bob?
It was a
You know who actually brought Bob to Taggart's garage?
who?
Sonny.
Sonny, really?
Mm. Yeah, because Sonny's son Matt used to go over to Bob's house because they lived right across the street from each other. And you
That's
know, and then Bob was, Sonny was like, who is this old dude my son's talking to all the time? So Sonny went over there, and Sonny thought he was gonna have to get in a fight with this guy because he didn't know what was going on with his son because this guy was always hanging out with his son, this old dude. Oh, so that's how that happened. So Sonny went over and talked to him and found out who he was, and they started talking and became friends. And you know, he goes, "Well, I'd like to see some of this stuff." So Sonny got him to come over to Tackett's.
and then to come to find out, Tackett had known him
Yeah.
back in the, yeah, and that's the craziest thing, because it's like, it's funny how many people have these old stories, but yeah, when Tackett said when he started showing up. Oh, by the way, yeah, when you said guess who brought him over, I thought you for sure you were going to say Jim Sewell, because Jim Sewell's always got stories of hanging out
And
with.
Jim didn't come till much later.
Yeah, I remember him coming later, but I thought he might have come earlier as well, but okay, so the background that I remember, so what was happening then was I got there. There was a group of instructors, which was really good on Seafood Tackett's part, because not a lot of people are willing to give up, the floor and let other people talk, and other
Mhm.
people kind of grab the limelight and things like that. And so when Bob was ready to say something, he'd see us doing some sort of silat move or something that was um, not something that would probably work with JKD.
Right.
And he would say to Tim later, to Seafood Tackett later, he'd say, I was gonna say something, but by the time you finished talking and everything, I forgot what I was gonna say, and so Tackett starts telling him, just blurt it out, just just yell, just say whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
okay, Bob didn't really yell, but you catch him talking, and then we try to stop and what's he saying? But we had Bert Poe,
yeah.
who was a Marine Raider,
Yep. Hmm.
combat experience, um, all kinds of
Great stories.
great stories and maybe secret things. We have Sonny Bygum. Is that how you
Yeah.
pronounce the last name? Bygum.
Bygum, yeah. Potato,
Um,
potato.
and I met him as well and worked with him, but obviously didn't know him anywhere near as well as you. And I was around, of course, when he passed away, unfortunately, in the early '90s. And we had then Bob Bremer, the ass kicker of Chinatown, Bruce Lee's Chinatown School, and that term was actually that name was dubbed upon him by Dan Inosanto, they said
Hmm.
at one time. Of course, there's Tim Tackett, and by the way, I think I know what Inosanto book you were talking about earlier. I believe he said about Tim Tackett, he said the most well-rounded,
Most
martial,
knowledgeable, yeah.
knowledgeable martial
Yeah.
artist in the world.
JKD
Yeah,
practitioner,
high, yeah, JKD practitioner in the world. High praise from Dan and Santo.
yeah. Hmm.
And so, and but then just with those instructors, that was such an interesting format. But at first, it started out as, it was very much like a going to the, in my opinion, what I would guess would be going to the Inosanto Academy for various things, because we did our Thai boxing sections, we did our Silat, pretty much every Wednesday night, and then we would do Savat, and then we would do, and again, I'm very grateful that we did. I still pull these drills out. because it for a lot of people that start in JKD, they don't have dexterity. They don't know how to build
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
dexterity. So trying to be direct without dexterity and all that, they look like little mechanical men. But when with Bob Bremer's influence, he started to take what we were doing. And he said it was cool. He would look at the colleagues, oh, I love that stuff's so cool, what you guys are doing there. But he would take what we were doing and say, no, wait a minute, you see what you're doing there? Can't he stick his fingers in your eyes? And you're like holding somebody like this and the guy's hands right there, and you're like, oh, I
Uh-huh.
guess. But yeah, in grappling, you can't do that. And he'd go, uh-huh. And then there's that old quote that Bruce said, look at the arts, look at what they're not allowed to do, and then do that to them.
Right.
But the influence, I mean, you've got the stories, but the biggest influence I saw with Sonny, well, I don't know if you even call it influence, the biggest story, I guess, or memory I have is my first day there, that he was there. So not the day I met Bob, but maybe just a couple weeks later. I was warming up with my super fast Taekwondo kicks, low high, kicking that long red heavy bag that still hangs there to this day.
Yep.
And there's Sonny watching me, and he says, hey, throw one of those kicks at me. And I'm going, and I'd read Bruce's right stuff and all the articles about high kicks and being careful about, over. No, 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 I understand. I get it. Yeah, I'm just warming up. He says, no, 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 go ahead. And I said, I just want to show you something. And I said, I mean, and so I go, okay. So I flick a kick up there, and he's just like, "Hmm." And he shelved it and
Oh
just,
wow, that looked just like him too.
yeah. And I'm just like, I'm laying on my stomach with my leg over my head like a scorpion, you know. And I'm like, that was great. But Sonny was one of the original Navy SEALs, right?
Yeah.
Because he started in the what's it called? Underwater UDT.
UDT.
Yeah.
Yeah, underwater demolitions. Yeah, back when that's where they got the name Frogmen originally.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've seen the guy in GI Joe actually.
Yep. Yeah, because they were originally frogmen before they became seals.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's that isn't that how he damaged his heart? It was through a diving accident.
Yeah, that and his incident at the Mendenhall Glacier.
Oh no.
Yeah, he actually had a heart attack while he was climbing Mendenhall Glacier
Oh yeah.
and walked back into town to the doctor, and he goes, "You had a heart attack." And he goes, "Okay,"
Yeah.
which is
That's
the
not
kind of
good.
guy he was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then of course Jim Sewell was
Yep.
there. Jim Sewell came later, but as far as the sort of the amazing crowning, group of instructors, there was another Chinatown Bruce Lee student. And what was amazing is that Jim, when you go back and look at the records that Bruce Lee kept, the attendance records,
Hmm.
he had more time at the classes than many of the famous names out
Yeah.
there. What I really liked about Jim, though, was that anytime he was so honest, people would try to egg him to, oh, what is your best story about Bruce, and what did he mean to you in your life, and tell me some fond memories you guys had together, and he go, I didn't really know him well. I was a student and he was a teacher.
Mm,
It was that was our relationship.
mm,
And I mean, I don't even know if Linda Lee would even remember that far back to say, if he lied about it, to say, oh no, I don't think you were around that long. People, he could have gotten away with pretending to be much bigger
mhm. Right, right,
than
right.
that. But what he did have is he had some good memories, and he would also, sort of like Bob, he would speak out and say, hey, I remember Bruce telling us to do this. You guys ever work on that?
Mhm.
We get these ideas. But it was so interesting because at the time that MMA was just starting, I mean, or the UFC was just starting to become a thing. Um, it was like we were starting to discover almost a new, I mean, not a newer, but like an undiscovered part of JKD. like we were doing a lot of this stuff, but then when Bob got there and he started saying, look at things through JKD glasses, and he'd have all the memories of Bruce and all the hours of private sessions and everything. And it it made a huge difference because I still, I'm glad that, I remember doing Thai boxing and Savat and all that. And I absolutely loved it, and the dexterity from the Silat and some of the other things in Savat specifically. But if it wasn't for Bob, I don't know that the JKD in our group would have crystallized the way it did.
Yeah, I think that we really would have become more of a, I told someone this one time, but I said it would be more like a 8-course meal rather than the real deal. And he was like, no, but I won't say who it is because I like the guy, but yeah, but I do agree with you on that because we didn't have that type of focus, that type. I mean, we still had the mindset of wanting to just be that ass kicking kind of guy in any situation, but the perspectives that we're coming from seemed more like, I won't say hodgepodge, but some of these other guys who are out there, that grab this piece of this, piece of this, piece of this, piece of this. Oh, this is JKD because Bruce Lee looked at all these martial arts. And you got to remember, he studied them. And when he said study, that doesn't mean he went out and learned them. He watched them, looked at the mechanics. What is their philosophy? How do they work in action? What are their weaknesses? What are their strengths? And how do I overcome that? Or how do I better this? You know, as opposed to, well, I'm going to learn every single martial art on the planet, and that's going to make me the best martial artist in the world,
Mhm.
which would take you forever. And what was it? Bob's thing was like, well, you're going to be an old man by the time you get proficient. Like,
Exactly.
yeah. So
And that's why I think that's probably what drove Bruce Lee to discover the idea of simplicity. Because,
simplicity, right? Because
yeah, I
there's
mean,
so much out there.
yeah, so simply to simplify. And yeah, I mean, there, this could be a whole other video, and maybe we will one day to do one. But there was there was a guy out there that was talking about how he has a video. In fact, he actually used a picture of me, from one of our videos. Like I think it's me and Steve.
Hmm.
And but he doesn't talk about us. He doesn't talk about our group specifically. He just grabbed the photo. But he said the whole video is like how he no longer does JKD and why it doesn't work. Well, the thing is, if you watch the video and I know some of the way it's written and some of the things he said are for clicks and for people to pay attention and to give him as much notice as possible.
Right. Yeah.
However, I agreed with a bunch of the stuff he said because when you look at what has happened to JKD in the world as a whole, he was actually right. It was a lot of, and I think that he had probably trained enough in it that he had seen too much of this. And unfortunately, though, it's like, I mean, how many times I see a guy, I see guys in, like, somebody's fighting in the UFC and they'll say, oh, I think this guy's a JKD guy. Look, he's kicking at the guy's knee. And I'm like, in a left lead. And I'm like, okay, I guess, what are we the only people that kick at people's knees, or a guy throws a hand up and then grabs the guy's lead hand?
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, lops out. I mean, that's also Wing Chun, but there's a lot of this. Well, this guy's JKD or whatever, and what I found is that with our group, you were able to actually develop as a fighter. One, because you were actually preparing us to get in the ring before the cage was available, to jump in and do some amateur like Thai boxing matches or kickboxing matches. And it's a different mindset than just class training.
Yeah.
And so I appreciated that. In fact, for a while, and I did remove this as a requirement, but for a while there, I wanted all of my apprentice instructors, or instructors apprentice, we call them now, uh, to have at least one amateur fight. And I had some discussions and disagreements over it because some people come into it older. They might start at 50. And, so I was like, well, I don't really want to be waiving things for people if it's a requirement. And so
Right. Yeah.
then, but I do, have been encouraging it. And again, people say, well, then you're not really working JKD. Well, no, that might be sort of true. But the idea, it's all about the mind to me. If the person's never been in a fight before and most of the people in the class are fairly nice, it's different. It's kind of like when you're in combat, right? When somebody actually shoots at you or shoots you, that's different than shooting at targets and even pretending and
Or playing a stupid video game.
playing a video game. It's not the same. So I mean, anyways, but that was something that we got there, and with I've watched a lot of videos and I've looked at a lot of other and we've worked with a lot of other JKD people from what was originally the Bruce Lee nucleus, the Jeet Kune Do, it was called the Jeet Kune Do nucleus or the Bruce Lee nucleus? It
I
was
got
the nucleus anyway.
hold on. The patch is right behind me somewhere. Oh,
Bruce Lee
yeah,
Foundation.
that's the
Yeah,
nucleus.
it's the
There was
nucleus.
educational nucleus, then the educational foundation.
Yeah, so that came later. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so because of that, we got to work with a lot of the other Bruce Lee students,
Hmm.
different eras, and work with, and you know, I have to say that we never really came up short. I'm not saying that we couldn't learn something from somebody else. I'm not saying that, but I always felt like with Bob Bremer, especially refining what we were doing or helping us to do it, helping us to think for ourselves. It made such a difference in our group that we would come out there and man, we were like you were, and Taka was really focused on like hitting hard and the straight lead and all that. And then working going into your school, we were just we were always hitting with power. We're always focusing on just really knocking the crap out of stuff. And there's that one time we're at one of the events and we're the only people that are actually hitting the pads and with power. And the instructor came over and said, you don't have to hit so hard.
Yes. I remember that so well. We're
Well,
just working out. You don't have to hit so hard.
yeah,
I still remember that because like so when are you gonna start hitting hard?
yeah. Because when you're sparring, they're going to go even lighter. It's like
Right.
you don't have to hit hard. It's just sparring. So the the emotional content, when you're training, that Bruce Lee talked about is so important. And if you're not going to have it when you're hitting pads, then yeah, like you said, when are you? Um, but man, yeah. So what was your experience? How did you meet Burt Poe? Did he just show up at Tackett's?
Yeah, because um yeah, I think was it the first time I went up there? But yeah, he just happened to be there because I he was also the head coach for the Redlands Pal boxing league,
Wow.
and Mark Buster and Tim Jr. were involved a little bit in that. And that's how they got Bert involved, and Bert came up, and next thing you know, he's teaching his combat boxing, and as well, I would you just kind of grab the guy by right, just rip the flesh off their body kind of thing. And
That's
I was
boxing.
like, yeah, yeah, yeah. That
Yeah,
was pretty neat though too, because when I first met him, I was working out, and I can't remember who I was working out with, and he stopped me, pulled me to the side. We walked outside the garage, and he goes, "You know what? You're probably half tough, but see, these guys in here, they don't understand what you're doing, because they don't have a military background, and you're probably too aggressive for them. And if you want people to like you, you can't be so aggressive." I'm like, well, I'm just being me. He goes, I understand that. They don't understand that. So, and I still remember. So I went back in, and I don't know what I did to change. A year later, to date, I still remember this because Greg Evans put a book on my car, on my windshield. The I forgot how to say it in Japanese, Notion. But anyway, the Book of Five Rings.
Oh,
And I picked up the book and then went back into the garage. Then Bert grabbed me again by the arm. his famous grab you by the arm, pulled me
Yeah.
outside. He goes, yeah, so you know what? I told you. Now people like you. Okay. So that was interesting. Interesting, yeah.
That's so funny. It's I didn't realize how long he had been around as well because, I see these old guys in my mind, at first hanging around, and I thought maybe he'd come in with Bob, and when Tackett was preparing to move to the East Coast in 2022, or is it 2023?
It was
Yeah.
probably 2 years
Oh,
ago.
no, it was 23. Yeah. I was over there looking, and he had all these albums and stuff, and it shows me a picture, and it's little Brandon Lee, like, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13. And I think Linda was there, and then and then Tackett and Bert. Like, what the? So
Hmm.
I might be wrong on the age, but Brandon was small. I might be a little bit off on the age. I can't. It was a real photo, so it wasn't crystal
Mhm.
clear, high definition. They're only this big on the
Right.
in the photo, back against a wall. But yeah, I was like, what's Bert Poe doing there? It's like he actually brought him along to something, and yeah, I was back in the, I don't know if I should tell this. Yeah, in the early 90s, I was studying Tony Robbins and NLP and stuff like that, and the power of modeling and all that to make sure people liked you and to feel
Mhm.
connected. And when Bert would teach, I used to model him because I started thinking, what if he has a flashback and starts killing people? So I want him to know, hey, he can trust me. It might not have only been that. I didn't want him to like me, but it was like he would talk about like the first time he killed somebody in the army. I'm sorry,
Marines.
the Marines, and he explained it. Everything, everything. We can do the extra features if you guys want to hear that story.
Uh, 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 uh.
But I will say what was interesting about him, and this is what kind of scared me a little bit, was that he was explaining. I'd watched like Bronson movies and all that, and where they kill some bad guys, and then the first thing they do is they run and throw up, right? And Bert told this story, and he goes, about how he lined up his
Yep.
rifle, and he says, you know how in all the movies and everything, people always they get sick and they run and they throw up, and he goes, the only thing that went through my head was bitchin' shot. And I was like, oh my goodness. And we would laugh, right? He would talk about ripping eyes out and guy howling, and we're laughing. And I get in my car driving home going, what were we laughing about? But I kept coming back. But that's the thing. When you're in those live action things, you have to kind of put I mean, you know how it is. You have to be able
You
to,
gotta learn how to deal with it somehow.
yeah, you got to be able to put it aside if you're going to actually be an efficient soldier, right? I mean, efficient Marine. Somebody, by the way, came, I didn't know if anyone had ever challenged Bert's record. I don't know if that's ever happened. I know we've talked about him a few times, but I had a guy show up who was a Marine and in my class, and he came up and said, "Oh, by the way, everything you guys say about Bert Poe is true." I went and I looked up the records and and this and that, and I was like, "Oh, okay, great. Yeah, I mean, I've never heard anyone challenge it, and I don't know why they would, but as far as his military record, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and all that. I still get confused what wars he was involved in and all that. I had him from World War I all the way through
Nice.
Vietnam. So
Yeah. No.
I may not be the best historicist, histor history buff when it comes to Bert's military career. I was starting to write a movie on him, and I wanted to play him as a young person, and unfortunately, so much time has gone by. If you look at the movie,
Ain't young anymore. No.
I'm not young anymore. That movie behind me is 10 years old. And it's just coming out, but Target Jeremy. But yeah, I'm 52. So, but if my son gets into acting, That was the thing about Bert. He's Native American, right? But he had
Right.
blonde hair and blue eyes. And I thought, wow, that would be amazing to do that, um, to play that role. But it was really hard pulling the story together too. I talked to Tim and other people to get, but the stuff that happened like when he was a kid and all that, I got bits and pieces, and we just you'd have to fill in fiction. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's neither here nor there. Um, Jim Sewell shows up about 95, 1995 maybe. Because I remember this stuff more clearly because I was still pretty new. This is in the middle of a long stretch of you being there, but um, I think that's around 94, 95. He's maybe 96. And then he didn't come necessarily every class. He would show up because he drove truck. He was
Yeah,
big,
that's
and
right.
then he would show up. He'd enter. Sometimes he'd park his truck out front,
Yeah.
and um, and then he had his little tidbits, and it's like, wow, man, these people met Bruce Lee. Then this other big guy shows up one day, and I'm like, who's that? Oh, that's Bob Bremer's son,
Oh, Bill.
Bill. And and this was the thing that kind of struck me funniest too, is that he's telling stories and everything, and we find out that he had more time at Bruce's class at Bruce Lee's Chinatown School than a lot of the famous names out there.
Mhm.
But not everybody wanted to be a teacher. Not everybody was, and see, I think that Bruce Lee would have appreciated that. Everybody, they think of teaching as their black belt, and it's like, okay, I finally arrived. Nobody can touch me. Nobody can hurt me because I'm
Yeah.
a teacher finally.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, if you, I mean, you train to get good, and hopefully you love it, and hopefully it's a way of life. But that was the thing, is that some of these people, that was a time in their life, they look back on it fondly, and they're not out there trying to make a buck off of Bruce Lee's name every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but I think that what was really important about our group is that we are one of the reasons, I would say, that the name continued going in the early 2000s and things like that. The JKD was still being well known because the UFC came out. This Everything was about Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Mhm.
It was all about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and this and that. And we were studying it. We were doing it too.
Mhm.
And but we had our little forum on our website, the JKD Wed Night, and that was a really cool thing in those days, to be able to go somewhere and just write your comments and ask questions, and people from all over the world started taking notice of us. And um, Tackett was already doing books, and I was already doing magazine. I mean, you were in several books already, and we were all starting to do magazine articles, and um, but yeah, it wasn't. It was like there's been a dip, and it's happening again. There's always a little dip, it seems, in the interest in Bruce Lee and what he did, because there's a lot of disinformation, um, where it's like either people want to promote Bruce Lee as an actor, a very fit actor who fooled everybody, or or what he did in those days was okay, but um, it never worked now or whatever. And there's two answers to that. There's two sides to that, because I know what people are saying. I think that Bruce Lee would be just, if he was alive today and in his prime, he would do just fine. He may not fight exactly the same way. A lot of things have changed since then, but that's why he taught us as the instructors, as the people that carry, and I'm not saying I took from him, I'm saying, by
Right,
passing
right, right.
down the information, he taught us to think in a way that there is a structure, there's a scientific, um, I just said it, but structure, there's a scientific foundation. And like the laws of physics, those things don't change. And that was what was so smart about it. That's why he said he didn't want to call it give it a name and all this, because he
Mhm.
just wanted it to be principles. And he knew that by giving it a name, people tend to lock everything in. But what I found is that outside of our group, many people started feeling that they had to change the overall feeling and meaning of JKD, of Jeet Kune Do, to to fit in with the rest of the world. And so you see people training with again, train out of both leads, of course, train, learn how to fight, and don't you and again, you shouldn't really be a person that's locked into a lead, but we're talking about
Oh, correct. Yeah.
an art that's an intercepting art.
Right.
We're talking about street fighting usually. So why Bruce Lee was working first out of the strong side forward. People are training people out of their weak side forward. So they're not saying, no, I want him to train out of both, because they go, well, everybody else out there is in left lead, so let me have this. We want to do the same thing. And I was so grateful that our group was able to hold sort of the line and really go back and think and look at the actual foundation. And I still change drills. I make up my own drills. And I tell my students, you guys can make up drills for yourselves. There's nothing wrong with that. They're drills.
Right. Yeah.
There's a difference.
Right. As long as those drills are based on the JKD platform, and I don't want to overplay or over prostitute the whole JKD principles things, because people keep adding principles onto the principles. So they're no longer principles,
That's
well, we're
right.
more progressive.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and then you get the other. So what are the principles? What?
Yeah. That's right. Let me tell you. Let me tell you. And and so that's another episode. I want to get into on the next one, maybe, unless you have a better idea, which you might. But and that is, people are wondering, is JKD still valid today, and does it work? And a lot of times that means people don't really understand what fighting is, like Bruce Lee said in Way of the Dragon. I think that you got to sometimes, by the way, filter out that some of the stuff is just a movie, but
Mhm.
he did try to get some wisdom and even some Jeet Kune Do into his
Well,
movie.
yeah, I mean, he was a philosophy major, so a lot of that is hidden in the movies because people just watch it for the entertainment,
Yeah,
and they
but
don't
he's
grasp the message of it. Even in the movies, they don't grasp the entire message.
no. But what did he say in Way of the Dragon? He said what something along the lines of, whatever you can learn to defend yourself, then you should do it.
Right.
Something like that in the English dub. Well, if you can learn to defend yourself, then you should do it. And
Well, as long as Tong Lung,
yeah, Tong Long, Ah Long, Da Long. How many
there will
times he changed
always be men like Tong Lung.
it? Tong Long. Yeah. And if you think about it, he was even talking about a principle in the movie. He doesn't say, well, you have to have your elbow here, and you have to. He says, by putting your hip into it, and these,
Mhm.
and of course we go beyond that. Um, what was really cool with me and with Bob Bremer is, one time sometimes I would do something, and then he would go, it would trigger him and go, yeah, that's the way Bruce showed us. He did it like that. And like the sidekick with the heel pointed down the center line, and your standing heel. And I see a lot of people with the 2 feet like this, and they're side kicking like that, like a karate knee side kick,
Hmm.
bring it up and snap it out, and no hip, nothing. Yeah. And but it was cool because it's like Bob was like, "Oh yeah, do that again." But yeah, it's unfortunate that so many, so it seems the people that are still out there trying to, that they're still big fans of Bruce Lee. They still like the idea of JKD. And unfortunately, the number one thing for them is just to make money and get their name out there. If that was what was driving you and me, we would have quit decades ago.
Hmm.
If it was just money. Uh, Neither one of us have a school.
Yep.
I've talked about a class. And by the way, reach out. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll make sure that with the podcasts and the videos that there's contact information. But I have a backyard class similar to what Dan and Inosanto used to have. We work out in the elements. And I don't advertise. Every once in a while I'll put some cards somewhere or whatever, but I don't have a lot of room anyways. And I know you only teach privately, right?
Yeah.
So I teach privately. Dennis only teaches privately right now. And so people say, well, how come you're not doing seminars in China? And how come well, when you have a school, it's a lot easier because you can promote within first and then you advertise outside. And it also is hard when you don't know like if you're trying to get new people, you have to then make like a beginner's camp and then start trying to build on that. Um, we're just,
Ending.
yeah, we're doing this to keep the art alive, but not just because, oh, it holds a dear place in my heart because I liked watching Bruce Lee movies as a kid. I really believe it is the best martial art in the world because you're not bound by 1960s martial arts. As long
Right.
as you have the platform, as long as you have the foundation, JKD continues to be the best.
Right. I mean, and it fits in wherever you are, as long as you have the ability to be aware and understand the principles, you know, it can fit in, the whole, I know Bruce used to say, absorb what is useful, adapt what is useless, and reject, or, yeah,
Reject is
anyway, I kind of modified that a little bit, still to the adapt, but more to the, oh, I forgot my own expression. This is not good.
make something
uh,
up.
yeah, absorb, adapt, and then express,
Yeah.
because you have to learn to adapt to the situation because you can't do the same thing, not only because of your chronological age, but given a certain situation or circumstances, there's certain things you can and can't do. And, having the awareness to understand that, is this a life and death situation, or is this just someone, who's just got a chip on his shoulder, you know?
Yes.
And
Exactly.
most people aren't really prepared for, the former. Everyone's practicing for, and that's why, I don't mean to go up on a tangent, but that's why, like, when I was doing the workshops up at Matt's place, I would always ask these guys, why are you here? Okay, because I'm not a hobbyist. Okay. And, you know, I don't even want to say I'm a survivalist, but I don't want to just survive. I want to live, and I need to be able to do whatever it takes for me to live. But you have to understand, are you willing to go that extra step and understand that you might put yourself in a position where you might have to either take a life or have your life taken from you? And, that hopefully it changes their perspective because, if you're in it for a hobby, that's fine and great. But if you want to take it to that next level, you have to have that mental mind. You have to have that mindset, and a lot of people are not prepared for that. They just see a movie, or they might watch a UFC fight, or they might watch something and say, "Oh, I want to do this. Oh, that looks really cool." And training like that is different than training for. I'll use the term combatives.
Mhm.
So, so
Yeah, I
there.
mean, that's Bruce Lee's what was the famous saying quote? He said, "Lay your life before your opponent."
That's right.
And it doesn't sound good. I don't want to lay my life before. But the idea is if you're still holding on, that was the idea. If you're still holding on to, well, what's going to happen to me? What if he gets me? What if, and that's your whole focus. It's like setting goals. It's like anything where the way your mind
All
works. If
right.
focus is on losing money all the time. Well, what if I lose money? If I invest my money, I could lose money. If I stick it in the bank, I could lose money.
Yeah.
If I
Right.
buy something, I'll lose money. That's what your focus is. That's what you're gonna kind of
Yeah.
hit.
And that's the same, I don't know if that's where Bruce got it from because he was, he studied a lot. But that was the very same thing Musashi used to say. It's just like my life I don't care about. It's just I'm going into combat. I'm probably going to die. Am I ready
Yes.
to do this? So, but yeah,
Well, well, we carry on the Wednesday night group, and yet the name became well known. I thought it was funny when we actually opened when we got our website, calling it the Wednesday night group because a lot of us did classes on other nights. but it was because the class had been going for so long, since the early 70s, on a
Right.
Wednesday night. And it holds a dear place in my heart. It's a very powerful, I mean, to think that I have been more than two-thirds of my life in JKD. It's like I was barely 19. I hadn't turned 19 yet, I don't think. Yeah, when I started. And my son's 21 and he's getting
Oy.
really excited and into it. But we are here, we're going to continue this. But um, this brings us to a question. We actually haven't named this podcast. But I was naturally just going to say, welcome to the Wednesday Night Group Podcast. And I might have said it at the beginning for lack of better words, but
Right.
if anyone out there, if you guys have an idea, you want to send it in and be in the running to come up with a good name for the podcast. What we might default to, if we don't get any great ones, we might just default to the Wednesday Night Group Podcast, or just the podcast, right? That's a good one. Also, we are recording video for YouTube and other platforms. Currently, we're just using Zoom because we are working on looking at getting us a studio location, or at least a common location that acts as a studio with soundproofing and all that fun stuff. But yeah, bear with us. We just wanted to not keep postponing doing this. We've been talking about it for a little bit. We are still committed. I think you'd agree, Dennis, with going out there and working with people if they want it. As long as people are there to learn and to love this art, we will be happy probably to teach it. So we will put our contact information and everything where you can find it. And anything wise that you would like to finish on, Mr. Sifu Dennis Blue? Don't say Tackett's closing remark every time we left the garage.
No, that's his.
That's his. You guys will have to ask him.
There's nothing I can follow up with after thinking about that. So.
Something about dead whales. That's all I remember. I was
You ruined it.
sorry. I was talking about the country, and it was DED. Well, anyways, thanks guys for hanging with us, and we have in the next couple episodes we will have a guest. We won't tell you who it is just yet. We have a surprise guest co-host that we will bring on, and also, if you have anything that you would like us to talk about, any things, philosophy, fun stuff, training, feel free to write us, to put things in. But like I said, if it's on YouTube, you can just add it to the comments. And if you're listening through the podcast, then through the various means there, as well as emailing us, which we'll provide. All right. Thanks, guys, for hanging out.
Cool.
We'll see you next time.
See you at the podcast.
Podcast.